just say to yourself, I'm done. This is what they. Why? A lot of people would have said, I'm going to come out. Why are you staying in this?
I can't because I want to make America great again. It's not great right now, and we can do that. Laura, we can do it. We can get it fixed. It's harder now. It would have been so much easier if we just finished off that. Everything would have been so perfect. We had the border set. Everything was set to rock and roll. We had no.
So you feel like you have an obligation to America.
I do.
Because
as Laura Ingraham last night on the town hall on Fox News with Donald Trump, and she asked a very good question. I love that she asked this question to Donald Trump. Do you ever feel like just saying, I'm done? And his response is very quickly, I can't, because he still wants to make America great again. To me, it's obvious that the play from the left has been, I don't think Joe Biden is going to be able to beat Donald Trump policy versus policy. We need more. Enter Lawfare. And enter the Annie Frey show studio, Will Scharf, who is a candidate for Missouri Attorney General and a former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Missouri. Always good to have you, Will. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
Lawfare? Is Lawfare? I never had heard that term until this instance.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what's going on. I mean, when you look at what they're doing to President Trump, and none of this would be happening if he weren't running for president. I firmly believe that. But they're criminally prosecuting him all over the country. They're trying to take his business away in New York. They're throwing just these absurd allegations at him day after day after day. And it all adds up to exactly that, to a campaign of lawfare being waged because they know, mano a mano, Trump's going to wreck Biden every time just because of how bad a president Joe Biden's been.
Do you feel so you also serve as Trump's attorney, and that's one of the reasons we love having you in here, because you have a very front row seat to what is being done to Donald Trump, and you're part of defending him against a lot of these attacks. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the ruling in the New York City fraud case and that $355 million or something like that. It's funny money in my terms. I'm a thousandaire over here. I don't know how to speak in those terms. He was talking last night. Was it the Eighth? Is it the Eighth Amendment? Like cruel and unusual punishment? Does that apply?
It's we're going to have a lot of grounds for appeal in that case, and we're investigating those now. We're preparing to move ahead with that process. It's just really important to note that Tish James, this radical leftist attorney general of New York, campaigned aggressively on the premise that she was going to go after Donald Trump's businesses. She was going to take his money away. She said that publicly. She said it over and over and over again. And then she went out and did it. That's not the way prosecutions, that's not the way the legal system is supposed to be used in this country. And it speaks to what President Trump has said all along, that this is really about election interference. So we're going to appeal that judgment. I think we have very strong grounds for appeal. The judge in that case, Arthur Engoron, however you want to pronounce it, he made so many just awful rulings, whether it was on evidentiary issues, excluding evidence, letting evidence in. His legal judgment is just so replete with errors that we're going to have ample grounds for appeal. But in the meantime, President Trump has essentially $400 million just hanging over his head. It's totally unfair. It's not the way the legal system is supposed to be used in this country. And it just speaks to the stakes of this presidential election. Are we going to allow these lawless leftists to continue running the country into the ground? And I think the answer has to be no. And if we don't fight now, I don't think we're going to get another opportunity.
Will, I listen to you and other people who are defending Donald Trump or other legal experts that I know are actually politically not super big fans of Donald Trump as a politician or whatever it might be. Everybody is saying that this is outrageous. The ruling, how heavy the fine was, along with other cases that he's being tried for that should he not be Donald Trump would never have actually hit him the way they are hitting him. But that's the case. That's always the way it is. It's just like if you want to accept reality in this country right now, the justice system is different if you're Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And look, I've been a fan of President Trump's for a long time, obviously worked closely with his administration when he was in office. In the last few weeks, we've seen this sea change where establishment legal minds, we're talking professors at Harvard and other top schools, legal commentators have all just been saying that this insane rush by Jack Smith to throw President Trump on trial at the height of election season, it's just lawless and it has to stop. It's election interference. It violates Department of Justice policy. We had Jack Goldsmith, who's a professor at Harvard Law School, used to head the Office of Legal Counsel during the Bush administration, who's not a fan of President Trump's by any stretch, just saying that these prosecutions have just gotten totally out of control. And we're hopeful that that really indicates that America, not just, pro-Trump America, but America as a whole, people are waking up to what's going on, and people are standing up to this weaponization of our system of law enforcement, the weaponization of our courts for political purposes. It's banana republic type stuff, and it's got to stop.
I hear Democrats regularly say that if you don't vote for Democrats, we will lose democracy as we know it, which I repeat is the most ridiculous thing to say. The only way to preserve democracy is to only vote for one party. I'm like, I don't think that word means what you think that it means. However, I'm wondering if a two-tier justice system is the way that it's going to be for good if Donald Trump doesn't win the election.
Yeah, you go back to the founding era, and this is exactly the sort of thing our founding fathers were worried about. James Madison talked about the risk of invented treasons being used to prosecute political opponents. You go back even further to late Republican Rome, and you saw exactly this sort of dynamic, the weaponization of legal processes.
Ooh, late Rome.
Sorry, I'm a history nerd. But
that doesn't end great.
It's really, really bad, and it's really just toxic to a democratic republic like ours to have the courts be used in this sort of way. Again, I firmly believe that if Donald Trump were not running for president, none of this would be happening. And Joe Biden himself said back in 2022 that he was going to use our system of justice to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president again. And that's exactly what we're seeing day after day after day unfold in courts all across America.
We're speaking with Will Scharf. He joins us in studio. He's going to be here for another 30 minutes, so you want to stick around and get your questions in. Ryan is monitoring the questions as they come in. Will Scharf, I was going to say he's the candidate, but I should probably shift back from Ryan to Will Scharf as a candidate.
I am, in fact, not running for anything.
For Missouri Attorney General. That only works if you cross it the other way to run in Illinois.
We could use more people like Ryan in Missouri state government, I'll tell you that.
Ooh.
Some of these guys, they put ours next to their name, but they don't vote like conservatives, and it's a real problem that we've had for a very long time.
Ryan?
I've changed my mind. I guess I'm running. I'm announcing it right now.
What are you running for? Just Missouri?
Yep. Missouri for you.
That's right.
Chief Justice.
That might
Yes.
and freedom.
Missouri for you and freedom.
I love it.
Yeah.
Candidate filing next Tuesday. Get in there,
There
man.
you go.
Obviously, I'm going to. So.
Ryan, you want to ask some questions? We have some
Sure.
listeners
Let me
typing
pull a
in on the
couple
Any
of
Fry
these up
YouTube
here.
channel.
I saw a couple really good ones that I starred here. Let me grab one from Vicky. Let's start with that. She says, for Will, when were the fraud charges filed? Before or after Trump announced that he was running again?
So the fraud, Tish James's fraud case, I mean, it goes back several years. They definitely initiated that investigation before Trump was running. I think actually when he was still president. So this goes back a ways, but I think across the board in all of these cases, we saw a serious ratcheting up of the pressure, a serious ratcheting up of the aggressiveness that they were being pursued with as soon as Trump declared. And I think, Arthur Engoron, this judge in New York, he was mugging for the cameras and was just keenly aware of the media attention that Trump being a candidate for president brought to his case. And I believe that affected his judgment, that affected the way he treated this case, that affected the way he treated the president here.
Will, do you think if Donald Trump, let's say he loses in 2020, hangs it up, and he tries to just, spend his time in Mar-a-Lago doing his thing, totally swears off politics for the rest of time. Are they doing this to whomever that Republican nominee is, or is there something extra that they hate about Donald Trump?
Yeah, first of all, I think the left, the radical left today will pursue Donald Trump to the end of the earth, that they are not going to leave this guy alone. And that's why it's so important that we reelect him president. But I think you're raising a really important point, which is that they've crossed the threshold. I mean, they've decided to make lawfare a tool in their political arsenal. And I think whoever is running for office, high office as a Republican in the future, is going to face exactly these sorts of challenges unless we beat them now, unless we show that these tactics don't work, unless we beat them in court, unless we beat them at the ballot box. the left is going to feel empowered to do this over and over and over again. And, I saw this. I think you guys know I worked on Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the Supreme Court, and we saw the left violate every norm, run roughshod over the normal process, smear Brett Kavanaugh worse than probably any man has been smeared in American history, because to them, at the end of the day, the only objective is advancing more leftism, and they're willing to do literally anything if it allows them to do that. And that to me is so what's so scary about the modern left. We're not talking about Dick Gephardt and Ike Skelton anymore. This is a new radical breed of leftists who don't feel constrained by the U.S. Constitution, who don't feel constrained by the rule of law. And that's why the stakes have just gotten so much higher in recent years.
We've got people making posting questions here on the Annie Frey YouTube channel. We invite you to come do the same. Just go to Annie Frey on YouTube and leave a comment in our live broadcast right now. Ryan, let's get into another listener question.
This one is from Edward. To be fair, I do believe he leans left. Can you ask Will, if Trump is innocent, why isn't he seeking a speedy trial for himself so he can get his acquittal before the election?
Well, look, some of these cases, the Florida documents case and the D.C. case most notably, involve millions and millions and millions of pages of discovery. I mean, speaking as a former federal prosecutor, speaking as an attorney, I would never counsel a client just to rush to trial without even knowing what's going to be presented against you. I mean, this is core rule of law type stuff. I mean, a defendant has every right to have effective counsel. A defendant has every right to see the evidence that's going to be presented against him. And Jack Smith, by rushing these cases, is trying to deprive President Trump of the due process rights that any other criminal defendant in America would have. To me, that's what's so dangerous about this. We're not seeking anything out of the ordinary. I mean, when I was prosecuting violent crime here in St. Louis, you'd see even relatively simple carjacking, bank robbery cases, stuff like that, things that are not nearly as complex as President Trump's cases. Those cases might take years to bring to trial, depending on the underlying facts, depending on the investigation, and really depending on how long the defendant's lawyers needed to review all the evidence against their clients. That's all we're asking for here. It's nothing out of the ordinary. But Jack Smith's team at every opportunity has sought to rush things, because instead of working on a legal timeline, they're working on a political timeline. And that's what's so offensive about the way he's doing these cases.
I think the underlining question that Edward is asking, and then Andy is making the comment here as well, Trump delaying is not the same as Smith rushing, is that there is some politics that is involved in the timing of the entire trial as a whole on both sides of the issue. But, I mean, the implication here from Edward is that if Trump is innocent, he should want to get to his innocence as fast as he possibly can. But what I hear you saying is, naturally, however, that would be legally really dumb.
Look, I think President Trump, he knows that he's innocent. I don't think he did anything wrong, and I think ultimately the courts are going to vindicate that. But saying that the guy should essentially deprive himself of his own legal rights because of the underlying politics, that speaks to the absurdity of this situation, that this man is the principal political opponent of the present administration. That administration has chosen to prosecute him in violation of Department of Justice policies at the height of election season. The idea that he should be depriving himself of his constitutional rights because of politics, that's just crazy, and it shows just how absurd this whole situation has gotten.
And I think, Will, also to look at the context of where these lawsuits are coming from. I don't know if this phrase applies to in legal terms, but it's not like they're really being brought in good faith. It's pretty obvious to anybody with 2 eyes and 2 ears that they need to more than sideline Donald Trump, certainly from the political realm, but you wonder how far they're willing to take it. That the idea that they'd be like, yeah, I'll go anytime, anywhere. You bring it and I can hit that ball out of the park. They're not really playing. The people bringing these trials against Donald Trump have a lot of ulterior motives.
Yeah, 100%. And, we've said from the start that there's real evidence that this whole effort is being coordinated out of the Biden White House counsel's office and out of the Biden Department of Justice. You look at the New York case with Tish James. Tish James's principal assistant, a guy, Matthew Colangelo, worked for her, initiated the Trump investigation when he was still in the New York AG's office, then became the number 3 at the Biden Department of Justice, then suddenly disappears and shows up in Alvin Bragg's office, the New York DA who's prosecuting Trump there. and Colangelo's leading that prosecution. I mean, we've seen across the board this insane coordination across the country, and it all ultimately leads back to Joe Biden and his close circle of senior advisors. And that's just wrong. I mean, you can't have a sitting president prosecute his principal political opponent, get others to prosecute his principal political opponent just because he's facing a tough reelection. That's not the way our legal system has ever been used before. It's certainly not the way our legal system should be used.
We're speaking with Will Scharf. He is a former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Missouri. He is Trump's attorney, and he's also a candidate for Missouri Attorney General. One quick question from a listener, Ryan, and we're going to take a break, and we're going to get more of your questions on the Anti-Fry YouTube channel over that break. So, Ryan, why don't you go ahead?
Yep, I always like when a listener asks a question that I wanted to know the answer to, too, because then I can say, well, if it's a bad question, it wasn't mine. This is Ron's. So this is coming from Ron. When Trump is elected in November.
Please, God.
Will the lawfare continue, or can Trump as president make the DOJ basically quit being so partisan?
Yeah, look, I think President Trump would appoint someone as Attorney General of the United States who would, share our feeling about the importance of the rule of law, would understand that the Department of Justice needs to be depoliticized, and certainly at that point they could dismiss the federal prosecutions against him. When you look at the two state prosecutions, there wouldn't be that similar power. The Georgia case, I mean, as you guys know, has gone totally off the rails with Fani Willis probably under criminal investigation herself at this point. The New York case with Alvin Bragg, that's technically scheduled to go to trial later, I guess, next month. But yeah, I mean, certainly if President Trump were reelected, I think a lot of these efforts would fall away. And I think we would also learn a lot more about their origins, how these cases got started, the involvement of Joe Biden and his senior advisors in instigating these prosecutions. And I think for the good of America, that would just be really important.
Well, we're speaking with Will Scharf here in studio, and we want more of your questions. Ryan's watching as they come in. So go to the Anti-Fry YouTube channel, and on the live broadcast right now, you can leave your comments in the chat, and we'll do more questions here with Will Scharf when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
What do you think Hunter Biden did or promised or winked about to get that money that he got? He's obviously not a financial
Well,
whiz.
from many locations. I mean, from Ukraine, it was crazy because it was on the board. He was paid $183,000 a month. He got $3 million up front, according to what I read.
But they say Joe Biden, there's no evidence that Joe Biden received any financial benefit personally. And to that, you say?
Well, he's got a lot of houses all over the place, and he's never been paid more than about $179,000, I guess, is the top. Look, he's gotten a lot of money. Hunter's gotten a lot of money. Hunter gets millions of dollars just for sitting on a board, an energy board, and he admits that he knows nothing about energy.
So we spend a lot of time talking about Donald Trump's legal troubles. There are quite a few of them, of course. And in the meantime, James Biden is testifying today, the brother of Joe Biden, who is a little bit part of this web, or maybe a lot of it, I guess we'll find out, of the Biden brand, whatever that Biden brand is. So while Donald Trump is taking the hits and the blows from Lawfare that is just completely set out to marginalize him on a political realm, if not more, it is important to understand, too, that Joe Biden has his own legal concerns. We've got everything that is Hunter Biden and the Biden brand, but we also have the classified documents case, which there's a parallel there of some kind to what Donald Trump is facing. Will Scharf is in studio with us right now. He is an attorney for Donald Trump. He's a candidate for Missouri Attorney General and a former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Missouri. Will, when you're comparing notes between what the Bidens, specifically Joe Biden, is dealing with and what you have that front row seat to what Donald Trump is dealing with, how do you feel that the Justice Departments are putting the pressure on?
Yeah,
comparatively.
I think the Biden family's foreign corruption scandal, really all of their corruption, is the greatest political scandal in American history. I mean, as President Trump said with Laura Ingraham last night, Hunter was getting millions and millions of dollars from Ukraine, millions and millions of dollars from China, in these sort of just blatant foreign influence peddling deals, all predicated on the family brand, meaning Joe Biden. His brother Jim was involved in just outright healthcare fraud that led, by the way, to closures of rural hospitals in Pennsylvania. I mean, this was a huge, huge scandal. And there are emails that show Jim Biden basically saying that Joe was going to be cut in, floating the possibility of Joe Biden taking an equity stake in this company he was working with. I mean, just time and time again, you see these trails, a paper trail, money trail, all leading back to Joe Biden. So the idea that Joe Biden wasn't involved in these corrupt business deals, the idea that he had no idea what his family was up to, it just doesn't pass the smell test. And in a fair world, their activities would certainly be more heavily scrutinized than President Trump's. I don't think President Trump has done anything wrong here. I think with the Biden family, it's just the seediness of these foreign corrupt deals is so bad. I mean, this is, again, exactly what our founders were worried about, foreign powers buying off American politicians. And really, I think that's the story of Joe Biden's life.
Chris says on the Annie Frey YouTube channel right now, let's open up to every single politician to be investigated like Trump is. I'd love to see how the Clintons, Obamas, Bidens, Pelosi's all got rich off of set income. You know, I've said this before. You know, I don't know that Donald Trump has led a perfectly squeaky clean life, but it sure seems like the amount of investigations that they've done into Donald Trump and his family, that when it plays out, it shows that all of the things that have been manifested in the media and by his political opponents so far have not really materialized to be what they said they needed to be. But in the middle of all of this happening, the timeline, the passage of time, the political capital exists in the capital C chaos that they have created to try to marginalize Donald Trump. It makes me wonder if you investigated with the same fervor the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bidens and Pelosi's and so on, throw Republicans in there too, if they could do the same thing to them that they're doing to the Trumps.
You know, it's worth noting President Trump came into office a billionaire. He made his money building businesses, obviously his wildly successful TV show, The Apprentice, selling books. I mean, he made his money long before he was involved in politics. With these other families, particularly the Bidens, I think it's true of Nancy Pelosi as well, the Clintons, the Obamas, they made their money off of politics. And that's just a fundamental difference in the way that we should be thinking about these scandals. I mean, the Bidens, they were out selling the fact that Joe Biden was the sitting vice president. He might be president in the future. That's why you have to pay us millions and millions of dollars. Nancy Pelosi, I think a lot of these congressmen, they regularly trade on what for private citizens would be insider information. They know a new federal law is about to pass or a new federal investigation is about to start, and they buy and sell stocks based on that information. It's something that no private citizen would be allowed to do. I think it's a great scandal. American political corruption in general, I mean, we're just scratching the surface of it. We've got to clean it up. I mean, we've got to stop these people from profiting off their offices because it just fundamentally corrupts our system, our entire political system.
We need a reset that really does restore in you know, the mindset of our founding fathers, the idea that the people are that's the entity that reigns supreme. It seems if you get plugged into federal government, potentially state government as well, you become of a more elite class than the plebes who are the ones who sent you there. You assume that they're the ones who sent you there. And then they get to stay there forever and continue to benefit off of the system that they have been plugged into. And I don't really know what the solution is. I know people talk about term limits, but then I see people in Missouri talking about how term limits have been detrimental to the way state government is run in the state of Missouri. I see points on both sides, but how do you get a political system, a government system, a legal system that once again is restored to the people? Because right now that's not who's being served.
Yeah, and I also put a lot of blame at the feet of the mainstream media, who are more than willing to cover even the scent of corruption when it's on the right. But the second you're talking about a Democrat, the second you're talking about anyone whose politics are left, they just seem to turn a blind eye to it over and over and over again. I promise you, no Republican House Speaker would get away with financially what Nancy Pelosi has gotten away with over the years. I think the same is true of the Clintons. I think the same is true of the Obamas. As you said before, it's this two-tiered system of justice that's emerged where Republicans are held to a totally different standard than the Democrats. And to me, that's just deeply corrosive of our whole democratic system. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, you spend 5 minutes in Washington, D.C., you start understanding the entitlement of these congressmen and senators. It's a real problem. I think it starts with electing good people to these offices, and then it finishes with just holding them accountable each and every day that they're in office. I mean, I don't think that congressmen should view their seat in Congress as a step towards getting rich. I don't think they should be cashing out on the back end and going and becoming lobbyists and lobbying their former colleagues. It's all just deeply seedy, unseemly, and just not right.
I'm going to ask a couple questions here from Andy, who is on our YouTube live chat. And we encourage everyone to come join us there and pose your questions as we speak with Will Scharf in studio here. I don't know how familiar you are with, everything that's going on with Joe Biden, because a lot of that exists in the political realm, but I would assume with a legal mind, you have an interesting perspective on this. A couple things that Andy says here. What specifically did Joe Biden do while not a private citizen that is corrupt? And then he follows up with, what evidence is there that Joe Biden specifically received compensation for any of the Hunter or Jim Biden entities?
Well, so we have emails from Hunter Biden saying that he was regularly paying his dad, that he was covering his expenses, 10% to the big guy, all that. In terms of corrupt acts in office, I think the clearest example is right out of Joe Biden's mouth, where he said that he held up billions of dollars in American loan guarantees to the Ukrainian government until the Ukrainians agreed to fire Shokin.
And I quote, son of a bee.
Son of a bee. Shokin was the guy who was investigating his son's company.
Huh.
I mean, you want to talk about federal bribery, you want to talk about a quid pro quo. It's tough to get better than that. And in a fair world, that whole saga would have been thoroughly investigated by the Justice Department. But again, it just all seems to have been brushed under the rug. I mean, if you go...
Andy says that big guy is not evidence, and that was while Joe was not in office. He was the vice president when he was getting the guy fired.
He was sitting vice president when he got Shokin fired. The stuff about the big guy, it's all Hunter talking historically. I mean, Hunter says in emails to other family members that 50% of all the money he made was being kicked up to Joe. Now, Hunter's a crackhead, so I don't know if we want to take him at his word. But certainly it raises eyebrows, and it's worth investigating. I mean, if you're a prosecutor looking at the emails that are on Hunter Biden's laptop, you have to think that it's something worth taking a look at. But the Justice Department just seems to have turned a blind eye to it. It's the same with this recent scandal with Biden's brother and this healthcare fraud. I mean, you again have explicit communications where his brother is talking about cutting Joe in on these deals, tying it into the forthcoming presidential election, saying that Joe is going to effectively be running on the basis of the work that they're doing. I mean, can we show a quid pro quo based on what's in the record? I don't know, but there's certainly enough there to kick off an investigation and to look much more deeply into the Biden family's finances. As these House investigative committees have started subpoenaing records and started getting those bank records, we're getting more new questions than we are answering. I mean, there are weird things like the fact that the Bidens were all buying like offshore life insurance policies. I mean, this is the stuff that to a former federal prosecutor, to me, it reeks of foreign money laundering. And yet no one's really looking at it. And to me, that's the shameful part of this. If we're going to have an aggressive system of justice, it should apply equally across the board. But again, when it comes to Democrats, they seem to get pass after pass after pass until, like Bob Menendez, the senator from New Jersey, they're literally caught taking payoffs in gold bars from foreign intelligence actors. I mean, if that's what it takes to kick off an investigation, like it's crazy.
Yeah, that brought us based John Fetterman. This is a wild ride that we're on here.
I mean, you guys have heard me talk. What's happened to Fetterman in recent months is just incredible. I mean, this guy, like, we all thought that he was just, one, a total leftist, and two, non-compass menace. But he's been totally based on issues like public corruption, on issues like Israel. I mean, I love the new John Fetterman. I wish more Republicans were as outspoken and upfront and just as blunt as John Fetterman's been.
Yeah, he's funny. I enjoy it. Every time I see a clip of him, I'm watching it. Will Scharf, before we let you go, I want to give you the opportunity to set the tone for how you see the next 8 months or so, 8.5 months, which is leading into the election. Going back to Edward's comment before, who I don't think is a Trump supporter, there is political sense in delaying a lot of these, if not all, as many as they can, trials until after the election. What do you see happening in the Trump legal world as we approach November?
So, look, we're waiting on two key rulings out of the Supreme Court. One is the Colorado case on ballot access. We expect to win that one resoundingly. That's over whether President Trump's allowed to be on the ballot at all. It's this insane 14th Amendment argument leftist lawyers have made all over the country. We could hear from the Supreme Court on that tomorrow. I mean, that's hanging out there. We've appealed to the Supreme Court. We've moved the Supreme Court for a stay based on our presidential immunity arguments in the D.C. case. We could get that ruling any day now. This New York criminal case with Alvin Bragg is scheduled to go to trial next month. I mean, these legal issues aren't going away anytime soon, and I think it's unfortunate that instead of having a political election focused on the issues, focused on Joe Biden's record and Donald Trump's record in office, we're instead talking about these legal issues. But I think we're certainly hopeful that we're going to be able to fend off these legal attacks, that President Trump is going to have a fair opportunity to run for office. And I think that if we're successful in that, President Trump's going to win next November, just based on how bad a president Joe Biden has been and how much better things were under Donald Trump.
If Donald Trump wins in November, how many of his own problems can he solve? Which ones can't he?
Well, I think with fair leadership at the Department of Justice, the federal cases should be dismissed. I don't think they should have ever been brought. Some of the other issues, I mean, it's pretty well established that you can't indict a sitting president. You can't bring a new criminal action against a sitting president. I think if President Trump wins, that would really be the voice of the American people saying that they reject this campaign of lawfare against him. And I'd hope that that would impact the way some of these other cases are proceeding as well. This New York civil judgment and the judgments in the Carroll cases, I mean, those are real problems. They're trying to take away President Trump's businesses, take away his money. I give him a lot of credit for being willing to stand up in spite of those efforts, really to take away everything that he's built, that he's spent a life building, and that he's still willing to put himself through this political process. And I think, you know, as he said the other night, to him, it really is all about bringing back American greatness and bringing back the successes that we saw under his administration and making sure that America is just a better country for the future.
Yeah, he said last night that his revenge will be his success, and that is about the sweetest revenge that he could have, I'm sure.
It was a beautiful line. I think it speaks to what's in his heart, and I think it's just really important to fight back against this leftist narrative that, you know, Donald Trump is consumed with revenge or all that. I mean, I don't think that's true at all. I think this is a guy who really wants to make America better, who sees what's happened in the last couple of years and knows that it's just totally unsustainable.
Well, Scharf, people are already asking for you to come back and talk about the Georgia case, among other things. So you're welcome back as soon as Brad can work it out with you. Thanks for being here with us again today.
Thanks so much, guys.
Of course. Will Scharf is a candidate for Missouri Attorney General, but he is also Trump's attorney and a former federal prosecutor for the Eastern District of Missouri, incredibly well-versed on all of these legal issues facing the current president of the United States and also the former president of the United States, who could potentially be the next president of the United States. Like I said, what a wild ride. We'll be right back. Don't go away.